Okay.
There we go. Bing, bam, boom. And we are, give it a while, it starts just straight up there. Okay, it still says, now we're going. All right, and we are live, ladies and gentlemen. Arknolia and the Doctor, episode 12, I think it is, of our Music Memories series.
Yes.
I got kind of like, I got a little sidetracked on how many episodes we done of this particular series, but it's a good reason. We got lots to cover here, and one of the groups that we're going to be covering here right now is, of course, as part of our British Invasion section here of our series, the Rolling Stones, who are often cited as the world's greatest rock and roll band in the world, and probably for a good reason, because they are still together to this very day.
Yeah.
Though they have, of course, haven't been doing any releasing any albums or playing any shows as of late. I think the last Rolling Stones studio album came out in what year it was? I think it was 2005. It's been that long, I think it was.
I'm not sure of that, but probably so.
Maybe I should probably look up on the albums there because that was the last studio album that I remember. I think it was called A Bigger Bang, for what I understand.
I think there's been at least one after that, but
One after that.
I don't remember the name.
I don't really remember myself, believe it or not, because it's just been so long since we heard any new music from them, let alone have any have their stuff played on the radio. Because nowadays all the rock stations are conforming to classic rock stations, and it's only goes for the main songs we know like the back of our hand, whether it's "Start Me Up" or "Can't Get No Satisfaction" there.
Yeah, there's at least two eras of the Stones. There's the early stuff,
Hmm.
then kind of a breaking point at Satanic Majesty,
Yep.
and it goes into later stuff, and then after that, even later stuff.
Yeah, throughout the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and the 2000s, they're still out there. Now, the lineup back then, as we know, was Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, Brian Jones, Bill Wyman, and Charlie Watts. Nowadays, it's just Jagger, Richards, Watts, and Ron Wood, who came in replacing with Mick Taylor, their second guitar player, who came in to replace Brian Jones, who died in 1969. And there was a lot of a questioning about his particular death and how that occurred there.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things that's worth investigating because there's theories on that one.
A lot of theories on it. I remember there was this one program called VH1. One Mick Taylor, let me hold up there. Someone screwed up there. There was a program on the VH1 channel called VH1 Confidential, which pretty much told the whole story about the drowning of Brian Jones and how that occurred. Some speculate he was high on the acid when he fell into the pool there, or crawled into the pool, or whichever there, jumped in and just started hallucinating. And next thing you know, he was dead, found dead at the bottom of the pool there.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And it was sad because, like he was the one who pioneered the playing of the Vox teardrop guitar early in the Stones' career.
and actually, early in the Stones' career, he was supposed to be the heartthrob of the group, the one the girls liked, and they were on the. I think they either fired him or on the verge of firing him when that happened.
Or he left out there. Well, basically, according to the story here, Jones developed the drug and alcohol issues. His performances in the studio became increasingly unreliable, leading to him being dismissed from the band that he originally had founded. He was dismissed in June of 1969. They dismissed him. Mick Taylor took his place in the group, and less than a month later, he died, drowning in the swimming pool of his home at the age of 27. Now, Jones's death was often referred to many songs and many other pop bands out there, and also was the subject of poems by The Who's Pete Townsend and Jim Morrison. Referring to Jones, Bill Wyman, the former bass player, lamented the waste of another great innovator. You know, the Stones, including Jones, were inducted, of course, into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, as of course. And apparently, according to the story here, he was the one who originally one who started the Rolling Stones before Jagger and Richards, took over the musical direction of that group.
Yeah. Yeah, he was supposed to be the one.
Hmm.
And it didn't turn out that way, of course.
Yeah, of course, like apparently Richards was developed a unique style of guitar playing, which were Richards often referred to as the ancient art of weaving, where both players would play rhythm and lead parts together. Bands like Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, and Lizzy would later copy that style when you look at it there.
Absolutely.
Now,
The Stones
Richard,
the Stones generally stayed with their root sound, which was kind of like rock and roll with a tinge of the blues, but every once in a while they kind of experimented with stuff.
correct, yeah. I mean, the song, even with their album covers as well, the original Beggar's Banquet, featured a toilet with a bunch of graffiti written on the wall behind it. That was later replaced with the all-white cover with the cursive writing on the front and in the back as well there. And we know which song came from that album, the famous, infamous Sympathy for the Devil.
Uh, yeah, I was going to say it wasn't that album, but it was.
It
Uh,
was.
and also they had another album cover, Beggar's Banquet, not Beggar's Banquet, Sticky
Mhm.
Fingers, that
Oh yeah, we
originally
know
had
that one.
the zipper
Zipper
on
on
the
the front.
front that actually
Yep.
worked.
Zip down. Exactly. That was like, and on the inner sleeve, in the light inner sleeve, featured there's some guys in his underwear. Believe it or not, white underwear there.
Yeah,
And apparently that cover was shot by one Andy Warhol, from what I understand as well.
yeah,
And a lot of times, I don't know if it's still available on vinyl or whichever, but I know there was a long period of where the zipper was reattached to the reissues of that album. I guess I forgot year and label it came out on because
yeah.
most of their stuff was reissued on Virgin Records throughout the 90s there.
Hmm.
That's when he signed a deal with that company there. And a lot of their stuff was getting reissued here, including ones like Some Girls, and my one of my favorites, Emotional Rescue, with the original poster, you know, uh, covering the whole original album cover. Believe it or not. Now that album, believe it or not, was one of my favorites because I heard the whole album on the radio as well as on summer camp that I was attending at that time.
Yeah,
And
that was their, I guess you'd call it nod to disco, because their songs on that album, a lot of them had a disco sound to them.
yeah, like Some Girls as well. The first track, Dance, was like another example of that, which was of course on Emotional Rescue. They had a dance part too that would be later be on a greatest hits compilation called Suckin' in the 70s. And believe me, they had a lot of compilations as well as a lot of live albums when you look at it.
Yeah, I thought what we'd do is kind of go through the studio albums first and
Yes,
kind of point out songs, not talk about each song, but kind of point out songs that, oh, you guys remember this one or whatever.
yes.
And I do the U.S. I wanted to do the U.S. versions because back then, just like with the Beatles, there was a U.S. and a U.K. Versions of each of their albums that were different.
Hmm.
And I'm going to go over to U.S. since, well, that's where we are.
And of course, the original label was called London Records that they were assigned to way back in England and in the U.S. there. And of course, now all those albums that appeared on that record label now are on this other label called, I forgot what it's called, Arico or something like that, or
Or
um
Atco, maybe.
Echo. I have to look it up again.
Yeah,
Dang,
because I really don't know.
because there's so much. We got all these labels reissuing the Stones albums there,
Yeah. Well,
and it's
their first album was the Rolling Stones, England's newest hit makers.
yep, man, and that came out in guess in 1965, I guess it was.
Yeah, it's either 64 or 65. I'm not sure off the top of my head.
Yeah. And the record label that has now reissued those earlier that early catalog. It's so Abkill. I think it's called. It's ABKCO. There, it's hard to pronounce.
Abco. That sounds like a.
Abaco. Abco. I think it is possibly. Yeah.
That sounds like one of the managers they had. Similar to his name, but I forgot what it was.
Yeah. The only one I know was so far that managed the Stones was Alan Klein, who was later be chosen by John Lennon to manage the Beatles after their manager Brian Epstein died.
Yeah. Well, on that first album, the Notables was. I think this was their first hit single, "Not Fade Away,"
Yes.
which was written by Buddy Holly.
Ah,
It was a
yeah.
Buddy Holly song. Then they had another one that was on there that was released called "I Just Want to Make Love to You," which was a Willie Dixon song.
Hmm.
And the other notable
And
song,
didn't Foghat cover that on their
oh
one of
yeah,
their albums? And oh
yeah they
yeah,
did, yeah they did,
yeah. So now, so all the people out there who associate that song with just Foghat, keep in mind the Stones did it before, and so did the guy who wrote it, Willie Dixon. Folks,
right.
get that through your heads.
And then the other hit single on there was a song called "Tell Me," which was written by Jagger Richards.
Hmm. Uh,
The rest
so
of the
these,
songs are decent, but they're not anything that you'll have to go out and go, "Oh, I got to hear that one." But
uh-huh,
they were good songs for what they were.
yeah. And I guess, some of those are still played on today on the radio as well. Mostly, as I mentioned, classic rock stations. They're the ones who are doing that. And they're the ones that are doing that stuff nowadays. There,
Right.
it was Decca Records in the UK and London Records in the US. And the next one, I guess, is 12 by 5. I guess the US version.
Right. And that particular album was actually pretty good. It was one of the first few albums in my life. It was one of the first albums. I say few. I had 4,000
And
records.
correction, I mentioned that their first album came out in '65. Correction, came out in '64. The same time the Beatles would start, the same year, I guess, at the same period.
Well,
So I guess, yeah,
given the success of the Beatles, people were looking real hard and desperately for English acts, and that's how Rolling Stones, Dave Clark Five, some of the others like that,
mhm.
uh, immediately hit right at that same period of time.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, and of course, later that year, we released the one called 12 by 5.
Yeah, and that was one of the first albums that I bought as a kid. Was
Hmm.
12 by 5, and I played the heck out of that album. It was a good album overall. Uh, of note was Around and Around, which was a Chuck Berry song.
Yep.
Uh, Time is on My Side, which was another single written by a guy by the name
Oh, we know
of.
that. We know that song like the back of our hands. That's for sure. Great song. Time is on my side. Still played a lot,
Oh,
believe
yeah.
it or not.
It's written by a guy by the name of Norman Mead.
Hmm.
And then the next one on there was Good Times, Bad Times, which was played a lot as a
Yeah.
Jagger Richards song.
Not to be confused with the song of the same title by Led Zeppelin a couple years
No,
later there,
totally
by the
different
way.
song.
Totally different.
And then one of my favorite of all time by them, It's All Over Now,
Uh,
which was written by Bobby Womack and Dooley Womack.
oh, yeah. And where's Bobby Womack today? I know he released a lot of albums there around the 70s and 80s there. Is he still functioning or did he pass on, I think?
I honestly don't know.
Uh, no, I guess I got to look that up. Bobby Womack. I guess it is.
Then they did on the same album a cover of Under the Boardwalk, the old
Oh
Drifters
yeah.
song, which was good. And they did a cover of Susie Q, which
Oh,
later on Creedence did.
oh yeah. We know that song like the back of our hands as well. That was mostly the CCR version is the one that got the most notoriety there. And sadly, Bobby Womack, who we mentioned a couple seconds ago, he did pass away in 2014.
And like I said, a lot of the other songs in this album are good. The ones I mentioned are the notable ones.
Hmm. Yes. And of course, the ones that still today get played on either in the Goodwill stores. If you go inside, you can rest assured you could hear the one or two 50s or 60s songs, including the Stones. There was a program called the Sunday Brunch on one of the local radio stations back in the southeast Michigan area. They would play a lot of songs from the 60s, some from the 50s, and throughout that whole area there. Just from the 61 to 69 there. And a lot of them was early Rolling Stones songs like, 19th Nervous Breakdown, The Last Time, Get
Yeah,
Off of My Cloud, all those songs. And some of those songs often did get played on its own on a regular time on a daily basis. Not necessarily a daily basis, but a lot of times you will. And there were about 2 days, 2 or 3 days later, you would hear another track from the Stones from the 1960s. Whether
yeah,
it's yeah, of course, the one that gets played the most was, of course, "Can't Get No Satisfaction."
yeah.
Hmm.
And actually, the record companies back then, as we talked about with the Beatles, had a
Yeah,
habit of releasing singles and not necessarily putting them on a regular album,
that's
but they
true.
would show up later on greatest hits albums. Two that come to mind are right off the top of my head. Well, three actually are 19th Nervous Breakdown, which you mentioned,
Yep.
uh, Honky Tonk Women,
Hmm.
and well, I had a third one, but actually there's more than three. We'll talk about those
I
too.
remember, I remember I had that single "Honky Tonk Woman" for a while there. Yeah, I guess it was the flip side of "You Can't Always Get What You Want," I believe. That was released as a single in '69, I guess.
Yeah, and that song is about 7 minutes long on the album,
I believe so. I think they may have shortened it out
probably.
somehow for the single version. I'm thinking as well.
The
Yeah.
next album was Rolling Stones Now in the
Ah,
U.S.
ah.
And songs to note are Heart of Stone, which was another single, and What a Shame, which I believe was the flip side of that song.
Mm.
And they did a version of Mona, which has been covered by a lot of people. One group that comes to mind for me is Quicksilver Messenger Service.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see, what else do they have in there? There was a song called Surprise, Surprise, but that wasn't released as a single or anything. It's just a neat song in the album. And again, a lot of these albums have other songs that are good on them. It's just not something that I would note at this point. And then they followed that album up with,
Out of our heads.
yep,
Yeah, and I guess a lot of I know some journalists commented on that on the cover of that album. You get to see a close up of Keith Richards' zits.
yeah, yeah. Now, this song was pretty. This album was pretty much loaded with good stuff.
Hmm.
Uh, it had Mercy Mercy on there, which is a Covey Miller song. They
Yeah,
did a lot of covers, especially early in their career.
yeah. They kind of mix. What they did is they kind of mixed the covers along with the original material. There, keep it more diverse. I guess at that time was considered.
Yeah, and then they did another song in that. Well, they followed it with Hitchhike, was another good song that was a cover. Then one of their own, The Last Time, which was a big hit single.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And that
Yeah,
was,
I was thinking about that song not too long ago. I was listening to that track, believe it or not, on YouTube recently because it reminded me of the Sunday brunch program that I mentioned. When it was sunny out, I'd be hearing some of those old tracks by the Sir Douglas Quintet and some other '60s acts like Eric Burden and the Animals, and
yeah.
of course the Stones as well on that particular program.
And that was a Jagger Richards composition.
Hmm.
And then I Can't Get No Satisfaction,
Oh yeah.
which was also Jagger Richards.
Yeah, and that was on the Out of Our Heads album, right? If I'm
Right,
correct.
right.
Ah, wow. The song does. God knows how many times that song has been covered God knows how many people have done it. Gosh,
And
let's
it's pretty
see.
much as far as singles or songs on a lot of lists of all times. It's generally in the top 10, and on one list, I forget which one, it's actually number one.
Yeah, and believe it or not, when you listen to the track there, that fuzz guitar and that other guitar, you could tell it's the same guitar. And towards the I guess it's towards the last chorus of the track during the third verse, you could actually hear a little bit of a little mistake there. Dun, 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 dun. The fuzz guitar that I guess it was either Jones or Richards that was doing that, but you could hear that's when he actually turned that pedal on to make that sound.
Yeah, which a lot of the early pedals, you could hear the sounds when they changed.
Yep. Yeah. So another excuse me, another noteworthy thing there you always need to keep in mind when you listen to that track there.
And then another song that's worthy of note is Play with Fire, which was written by a guy by the name of Nanker Fledge, which actually that's a pseudonym, that's a kind of like a pseudonym that the group used if they all wrote the song. So
Ah,
actually, the Nanker, you ever see Nanker Fledge? That's actually a Rolling Stones composition with all the group.
that's something. I think that was that the only composition with all those guys
Oh
combined.
no,
Oh no.
there were several.
Ah.
In fact, there's another one on this album called the Under Assistant West Coast Promotion Band, which
Mm.
was written by the group.
Oh, the whole band member. Wow.
Yeah,
Because usually people often associate Jagger and Richards often like they do with Lennon and McCarthy at
yeah,
times during that period.
yeah. They followed that album up with one called December's Children and Everybody's Children,
Oh.
which actually that's got some stuff that you'll know too. And it's
Yes.
another pretty good album actually.
Ah.
Uh, they released a live version of Route 66 on this album, which is a Bobby Troup
Ah.
song.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. That would be something to check out sometime there.
Yeah, and there's another song in here that's interesting called She Said Yeah, that was written by Sonny Bono
Oh
and
yeah.
Roddy Jackson.
Sonny Bono helped it up. Yeah, but I think he was just earning his wages at the time,
Yeah,
just as a songwriter.
he hadn't done anything with Cher yet.
And this was in around 66, from what I understand. Yeah, no, 65.
Yeah, and they did another Chuck Berry cover, Talking About You.
Mm.
Then Get Off My Cloud, which was another big single.
Oh yeah, still played on the various when you go out. As I mentioned, we tune on the classic rock station. Well, basically, there's two types of classic rock station that we often refer. The classic rock now we plays is usually either from the 80s or the later 70s, up to some a little bit apart from the 90s. Whereas the other classic rock station, where it plays only the 50s and the 60s stuff there, a little bit from the 70s, once read a particular radio station is still like that to this very day back in the southeast Michigan area there. And it's because I used to play that all the time, all that particular genre. Let's see here. And I guess the next record is Aftermath, which it came out in 66.
Yeah, well, actually, before we get to that,
Hmm.
they had a couple other songs in there that were relatively big. One called I'm Free.
Oh, yeah, which the Soup Dragons covered, believe it or
Right.
not.
And then, of course, we mentioned this before, As Tears Go By, which was written for Marianne Faithfull. But the Stones went ahead and said, hey, let's do it too.
All right.
And they did it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they did a live version of the song I'm Moving On, which is on this album.
Ah,
That was written by Hank Snow.
ah, interesting there. I'm thinking about this one song that they did, and now it just escaped my mind. I was going to ask, what album in particular that this song, and I just hopefully the memory would come back of the song I was thinking of. Oh, bitter. What is it? Bittersweet Sympathy.
Uh,
It was the Verb. The Verb covered this song. I guess for the in 1999. I remember hearing it. Dun 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 dun. You remember that hook from the violins on the Verb version there? I think.
yeah, I was going to say, it kind of sounded like you were talking about Sympathy for the Devil, but that's not it.
No, no, no. This one, I guess the one I'm version on. Let's see here. The Verb. Let's see. Bittersweet Sympathy. Yeah. Let me look it up here. Should be coming up. I hate when my computer takes its old sweet time there. Yeah, it came out in basically this. There were other versions by David Garrett and the London Grammar in 2017 there. Um,
Your
and I
chat's
guess
not famous in
again,
your chat says Bittersweet Symphony.
sympathy. Yeah, remember I have a little problem in pronouncing that word at a time there. Basically, what it did is I guess it was ripped off, I guess, from a Rolling Stones song. Apparently, what it was a lead track from their record, Urban Hymns, in 1997. It is based on a sample it uses from the Andrew Lawn Oldham Orchestra cover of the Rolling Stones song "The Last Time."
Right.
Include and involved in some legal controversy surrounding a plagiarism charge. As a result, both Mick Jagger and Keith Richards were added to the songwriting credits, and all royalties from this song went to former Stones manager Alan Klein. Um, in April 2019, Jagger and Richards signed over their publishing for the song to the Verb's frontman, Richard Ashcroft. And the song was released in June of 1997 by Hut Recordings in the UK as the first single from that album, reaching number two on the UK singles charts and remained in there for about 3 months. Now, in the acclaim in music publications, it was renamed as Single of the Year for both New Music Express and Rolling Stone, and is considered one of the most defined songs of the Brit pop era of the 1990s. And
Right.
I guess it was sampled from. I guess we presumed it for a long time that it was a cover of the Rolling Stones, but actually featured some elements of the Stones composition there.
Right. And then, like you mentioned a little while ago, that he released Aftermath,
Hmm.
which the interesting thing is all these songs on this album were written by Jagger Richards.
Yeah,
There was nothing that wasn't. And this song's loaded with some stuff. There's 11 songs in the album, and they're all in their own ways memorable. The big
yeah.
ones were Paint It Black, Lady Jane, Under My Thumb, and actually an interesting song in the album is called Going Home, which ran
Hmm.
about 11:35. And in a way, it was kind of a prog song, but it really doesn't fit the true definition of prog. It just it's just a really long song, which was highly unusual in these days. But it's worth noting. And it's a decent song.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, yeah. It's kind of funny. Some of these songs, are I have no words to say right now on this because I had to ban this idiot named Metal YR. It's a troll ass account saying they're commenting on how ugly my face is. I have a face like you. I don't know if it's YR himself, but there's usually those assholes out there who are trying to fuck your shit up, get you riled up by disrespecting you in your chat. So that motherfucker had to be removed.
Yeah. And we have a couple of things we need to talk about a little later that Not Famous pointed out, but we'll get
Yeah.
to those.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, definitely. I see what he said right here. Absolutely. We definitely got to get on to that one. That is one of the most interesting cases there is involving gender.
Yeah, the
Absolutely.
next
So, as you were saying,
well, the next album they did was one called Between the Buttons, which was kind of in a sense, a throwaway album. There's some good songs on here, but they repeated a lot of the good ones on an album
hmm,
they did later called Flowers, which I don't know if that was a con- uh,
Dead Flowers.
compilation. No, it was just Flowers.
Oh, okay. I think I saw that one time there on the record store. And by the way,
It's
I had Between the Buttons on the 8 track one time there. I got that at the garage
yeah,
sale. Figure, let's give this album a try out here because it had "Let's Spend the Night Together" on that album there.
Between the Buttons. I don't believe it was
Oh,
on
was
that
it there?
particular.
Well, it had some sort of song. I got to look that
Well,
album up there.
well, they had on there was one called Backstreet Girl, which was kind of a big one for them, and another one that was
Hmm.
almost psychedelic called Please Go Home.
And interesting enough, you had to really look underneath Charlie Watts to see these two little eyeballs to see the title and the group's name in there sketched in between. That was probably one of the most interesting way of doing that artwork. Now, the photo shoot of that album took place in November of '66 in a place called Primrose Hill in North London. The photographer was Garrett Manolitz, who also shot band photos for the cover of Out of Our Heads. And apparently, the goal of the shoot was to capture an ethereal, druggy feel at that time. That
Yeah,
feeling at the end of the night where dawn was breaking and he end up all been up all night making music stoned.
right,
You know,
right.
Brian Jones was disheveled, and his cover appearance on the cover disturbed many of his fans. In fact, one critic said that Jones looked like a doomed albino raccoon.
Yeah,
And according to now years later, somebody, the photographer, said that Jones was lurking in his collar. He said, "quote I was frustrated because it felt like we were on the verge of something really special, and he was messing it up. But the way Brian appeared to not give a shit was exactly what the band was about." Outtakes of this photo session were later used for the cover and in the sleeves of the compilation More Hot Rocks, Big Hits, and Phase Cookies.
right.
Now,
Yeah,
the back cover of this was dominated by a six-panel cartoon accompanied by a rhythmic poem written by, actually drawn by Charlie Watts, the drummer. When Watts asked Oldman what the title of the album could be, he told him it was Between the Buttons, a meaning undecided.
right.
Watts gave the phrase to the title of his cartoon, which in turn became the title of the album.
Now
And there was, yeah,
they followed up this album, which was probably my personal favorite, their Satanic Majesty's Request,
hmm,
because it has two or three of my favorite songs anyway.
oh yeah,
It has one called Citadel, which is a pretty heavy rocker. This album kind of is, in a sense, psychedelic in a way, but it's got some elements of prog here and there too.
yes,
Then another song called In Another Land, which
hmm,
that one was written by Bill Wyman.
ah.
And
Very
then,
rarely we get Bill Wyman to chime in any tunes there for those guys.
right. And then they followed that up with one which I'm pretty sure you're familiar with,
Yep.
2000 Man, which was covered by Kiss.
Oh yeah, that's interesting there. Wow.
And then they had on side two, it opened with a single, a little bit longer version called She's a Rainbow.
Oh yeah, we know that song. We heard that many times before there.
Yeah, and then it was followed by one called The Lantern, which is really a decent song. It's pretty good. Then on this album, my personal favorite, 2,000 Light Years from Home.
Oh yeah, that's where the Mellotron really kicked in there.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
that definitely had some
That was a trippy. That was a real trippy song to listen to for them to come up with because the way the mellotron was being performed on that song and the absolute feel and the concept behind it traveling through space and time.
Yeah, and like I said, that song that one always gets me.
Hmm. Um,
Whoa.
that was me, man. That was me. I guess notifications coming up on my Facebook and shit there always drove me nuts. Right there, and of course, Beggar's Banquet would follow afterwards, the one we mentioned about with the original cover there.
Oh yeah, and
Hmm.
this one had a lot of decent songs on it. Had
Yeah,
well, there's Sympathy for the Devil, which
yeah,
was one that gets played. And another one called No Expectations, which was a good one.
yeah,
Dear
and
Doctor, Parachute
yeah,
Woman.
Stray Cat Blues.
Yeah, Street Fight Man was on this one, which
Oh
was
yeah,
a
I remember. Yes, definitely. I'm looking at the both covers of the album here, and you get to know what I'm talking about. The toilet cover rejected for the original cover, the all white cover for the in cursive writing in there.
right.
Yeah.
Then you
Now,
had Salt of the
the
Earth, which was another pretty good song on there.
I'm looking right now to the cover here. Now, in August of 2002, Abco Records reissued the Beggar's Banquet album as a newly remastered album and a SACD/CD hybrid disc. This disc corrected an important flaw in the original album by restoring each song to its proper, slightly faster speed.
Right,
Due to an error in the mastering, Beggar's Banquet was heard for over 30 years at a slower speed than what was recorded. This had the effect of not only altering not just the tempo of the song, but the song's keynote as well.
right,
Those differences were subtle but important, and the remastered version is about 30 seconds shorter than the original release. So all this time we were listening to Sympathy for the Devil and those other songs you mentioned at a slower pace, I guess it was.
right, right.
Interesting. It's gotta definitely gotta check it out there sometime when we get well later on this evening because as you know I'm going to be Radio Select TV is going to be on the air pretty soon there.
Right.
Yeah,
We'll go ahead and do the next one, which was Let It Bleed, which is a
I am
pretty important album too.
because it was their first record without Brian Jones, who, as we all know, passed away, was found dead in his home pool, and there was a lot of we also gotta look at these speculations, a story about what it was that was going on here. I'm looking at it right now. There was a lot of legal troubles. You know, he was arrested a couple of times for possession of weed and stuff like that. You know, and there was apparently upon his death, the Who's Pete Townsend wrote a poem titled "A Normal Day for Brian, a Man Who Died Every Day." Jimi Hendrix did a song dedicated to him on US TV, and the Doors' Jim Morrison published a poem called "Ode to L.A." while thinking of Brian Jones.
Right.
Deceased, coincidentally, Hendrix and Morrison also died within the following 2 years at the same age as Brian Jones, 27.
Yeah, there's a big story about lots of I guess artists that died at that age,
Yeah,
which
Kurt Cobain, Janis Joplin,
yeah, for a
Amy
while
Winehouse. What?
it seemed like almost a curse of sorts. But
I know.
on Let It
And now,
Bleed, they started that one with "Gimme Shelter," which was later covered by Grand Funk.
yeah, the Sisters of Mercy as well.
Right.
And this man called that I saw called Rain Dance, who played at the Ritz one time, who's a frontman whose name I forgot, would later become one of the original cast members for the 1992 show The Real World.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think his name was Andre, I think it was.
Uh, Probably.
I gotta check that again, man. All these Let's see, Real World, 1992. Because I remember seeing them play it a couple of times at the Ritz and St. Andrews Hall. I'm looking to see if there is it should be coming up pretty soon there.
Yeah, another notable track on side one was "Let It Bleed," the title
Uh,
song.
oh yeah, and of course we cannot forget the one that we mentioned earlier. You can't always get what you want, Monkey Man, and of course one of my favorites, Midnight Rambler.
Yeah, yeah,
That's always been my favorite from that record there. The harmonica, the echo of the that precedes the drums and of course the guitars and the slide guitar,
it's
everything.
it's almost 7 minutes studio, but the live version I think runs longer. I think it's like 9, 10 minutes, something like that.
Yeah, it does. And that live version is on it now.
I
Joe
forget.
Yaya's out of which we all know has their drummer, jumping for joy.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Oh, I was just
jumping for joy with. No, go ahead. We're getting tongue tied here, folks. You have to pardon us. Each one of us trying to see get some words out, but each one keeps in the. But I'm doing most interrupting here, so my bad for that.
that's okay.
Hmm. Yeah.
Well, we probably
Andre,
yeah. Go ahead, Eddie, because you're in.
Andre Comnu. I think it's a Comear. No, When am I spelled that right? My glasses are fucked up. Comeau. He's from Detroit, Michigan. Um, they released their album Problem Factory, and one of the songs they did live when I saw them play was "Gimme Shelter," and it was close to the original. Believe it
Yeah,
or not.
yeah. I really like the Grand Funk version of that song.
Yeah, I am
Uh,
absolutely.
definitely heavy.
Definitely.
It was metal sound. I guess in a sense, funk was kind of a metal group, but not in the true sense of what we know metal as. But they were definitely heavy.
It was high energy rock and roll. You got to remember Michigan bands like the Grand Funk and MC5, Iggy Pop and the Stooges, um, the Bob Seger system had a lot of edginess to their music there.
Oh yeah,
Like if you were going to play the song "Death Row" by the Bob Seger system to the same person who only knows Seeger from "We Got Tonight" or "Hollywood Nights" or the Shakedown or the songs they know like Rambling Man, the stuff from Wild Lightwood, they would flip the heck out. They like
turn the
holy cow,
page.
or the turn the page. If they were to hear those songs like 2 plus 2 is on my mind, or the song I mentioned, Death Row or Lucifer, that would be a complete trip to them because it's like, oh wow, this is heavier than I. This is one heavy song here, dude, and which it was. It's up there. I
Yeah,
mean, when you look at it, the lyrics to 2 plus 2 is probably right one of the most profound anti-war songs next to Sabbath's War Pigs. When you look at it,
yeah, yeah. Well, the next album was come on, brain,
hmm
Sticky Fingers.
oh yeah, that's the one we mentioned. Yes,
Yeah, and they opened that with Brown Sugar, which was a single also,
yes,
and it also had Wild Horses on there, which that's a great song.
um,
This whole album is
great song.
actually pretty good, but I'm just like I said, I don't want to point out rather than talk about all of them, just the ones that were
Mm.
truly notable. And then another song that was pretty heavy for its time was "Can't You Hear Me Knocking,"
Oh yeah, that was played on the radio a lot of times for a good period of time there,
and
and
that's
that was a long one.
7.5 minutes or around that.
Yeah,
And then another one called "Bitch" that got played a lot.
yeah. Despite the title, because at that time radio didn't have any curse words in it, but in its title. But yet, keep in mind, Pink Floyd for many years was able to get away with the words "Don't give me none of that do goody good bullshit."
Yeah, on Money.
Yep,
And well, here's a song that you mentioned a while ago, "Dead Flowers."
yeah,
And like I said, there's a couple other songs in here that are pretty good. That
yeah. That's true there. And once again, the cover for that album, as we all know, featured a picture of Mick Jagger's, crotch area and the back as well. And of course, with an actual working zipper engraved on the album cover there.
Yeah, I actually had that album.
Yeah. And is it still in mint condition there with the zipper and everything else?
Well, actually, I had a time in my life where I pretty much had to sell off a bunch of my albums, and that unfortunately
Ah,
went too.
I see there.
But it's just one of those things that happens in life, I suppose.
I am. I see there. Yeah. There are a
This,
lot of things I wish I didn't get rid of when you
yeah,
think about it. But
yeah.
sadly,
I had the next one was Exile on Main Street, which was a double set.
yes, and their first double album. And apparently this was the album that inspired John Cougar Mellencamp to record his album Uh-huh, which came out I guess in 1983 after the success of Hurt So Good and Jack and Diane.
Right.
Yeah. He
And
tried everything. In fact, he tried everything he could, to get his studio, just get the songs sounded just like the album, and covered the terms of putting kind of sort of a pattern, some sort of a thing on the
mine.
walls up there. Yes, to get that exact sound that he wanted.
Yeah. And there's a lot of songs in here that are worth mentioning, but the two I'm going to mention are Tumbling Dice, which was covered by Linda Ronstadt,
Hmm.
and Happy.
Oh yeah, and that was featured Keith Richards on vocals there, by the way,
Right.
because there are a few tracks out there that feature Keith on vocals, whether it's on Emotional Rescue or what's that one song on Some Girls? I guess it's called. I forgot there. Son of a name go. It's been ages, folks. So
Yeah. And I can't help on that one off the top of my
yeah,
head.
that's true. Yeah.
And I'm wondering if this is a good place to go to show two next Tuesday on this because there's a lot to cover, and there's kind of at this point a little bit of changes in the way they did things because they followed that up with Goat's Head Soup, which is
Yeah, yeah. Which
pretty.
caused such a time, which is kind of when you think about it, the which was in. You look at the inner photo of the where the album jacket actually goes in. It actually featured a head of a goat inside of a which is Colbin boiling away there.
Right. But this might be a
That
good time
disturbed a lot of people.
for you to look up Altamont and talk about that a little bit.
Oh yeah, definitely. We got to talk about that whole situation there, because that was probably considered one of the most dirtiest words in rock and roll promotions.
Yeah, there was some
Um,
problems with that.
Lots of problems up there.
But
Almond Festival. Let me go. Go ahead. Go ahead there.
no, I was letting you go.
All right, let's go. Okay, there we go.
That's mine.
No, it's not Almond Rock Festival. Somebody go, stupid Google. You know what I'm talking about, man. Idiots.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, there we go. The Almont Free concert. It was a counterculture rock concert. It was held on Saturday, December 6th, in 1969 at the Almont Speedway, Northern California. Approximately 300,000 people attended the concert, and anticipated it was going to be the West Coast version of Woodstock.
yeah,
Now it had Santana, Jefferson Airplane, the Grateful Dead, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, the Flying Burrito Brothers, and let's see here. And there was a couple others here. And whoever came up with the idea of having the Hells Angels, one of the most notorious biker gangs out there, as their security, I don't know.
yeah.
Whose
That's
idea was?
well, obviously I say the promoters, maybe not. Maybe
Who
Hell's
knows?
Angels just decided to do it on their own.
Yeah, it's true because at the and it's meant to say that the biker gangs like the Hells Angels and the others would follow, whether it's the Warlocks or the Banditos, would be labeled as notoriously because of that incident. Because, as we all know, a man was stabbed to death during the Stones performance, and there was a lot of other shit that went on as well. There
Right.
was one of the Hells Angels was beating the crap out of the singer for the Jefferson Airplane, Marty Ballin,
Yeah.
believe it or not. The Grateful Dead heard about the whole thing, and when they showed up, they decided not to say performance. They said, "Fuck this, we are gone, man. Fuck
Yeah.
this."
Yeah. It was a bad thing overall, and I think wasn't this the one with the incident of of they beat the heck out of a black guy and nearly killed him?
Yes, this was. It was apparently the now since the event was best known for the constant violence, including a stabbing death of one Meredith Hunter and three accidental deaths. Two were caused by a hit-and-run car accident, and one by an LSD-induced drowning of somebody there. Scores were injured, numerous cars were stolen, and then later abandoned, and there was excessive property damage. Now, as we mentioned, the Grateful Dead was scheduled to perform after Cosby, Stills, Nash and Young, but declined to play before their appearance because of the increasing amount of violence. When you think now, now, quote unquote, that's the way things went at Altamont. So badly that the Grateful Dead, prime organizers, and the movers of the festival didn't get a chance to even play. The staff at the Rolling Stone magazine wrote in a detailed narrative on the event, terming it to an additional follow-up piece entitled "Rock and Roll's All-Time Worst Day." The day where everything went wrong. Now, there was footage shot from that festival, and of course done by Albert and David Maysels, and they would decided to call that documentary, of course, "Gimme Shelter."
Right.
Yeah. Now the whole thing about that is that I don't know what the fuck was going on or why. As we all know, it's like I don't know, were the Hells Angels that loaded up on LSD or beer or something like that? Because that was what they were mostly paid in, beer, and I guess beer only there. Now,
Right.
according to Spencer Drayden, the drummer of the Jefferson Airplane, the idea for a kind of Woodstock Fest began when he and our lead guitarist Norma Calhoun, I think his name is
Yeah.
pronounced. Yeah,
Jorma.
discuss Calhoun. Yeah, who later, of course, they put together. Him and Jack Cassidy would put together their group called Hot Tuna,
Right.
as you know, which did pretty well. It was to discuss the staging of a free concert with the Dead and the Stones at Golden Gate Park. Now, referring to the Stones, Dryden said, "We're next to the Beatles, and we're the greatest rock and roll band in the world. We wanted them to experience what we were experiencing in San Francisco."
Right.
So it was the drummer at the Jefferson Airplane that was apparently behind us. As the plans were being finalized, they were on the road, and by early December they were in Florida, believing the concert plans were proceeding. But by December of that year, that plans had broken down. In Paul Kantner's account, because the city and police departments were unhelpful in the conflict between the hippies and the Haight-Ashbury area, and the police was manifested in obstructiveness. Sears Point Racely, what's the number 3? But let me read that again. Sears Point Racely was suggested, but the owners wanted $100,000 in escrow money from the Rolling Stones. And at
Hmm.
the last minute, Dick Carter offered his Altamont Speedway in Anaheim, County for the festival. And Jefferson Airplane flew out to Miami on December 5th. Kantner said the location was taken in a spirit of desperation. There was no way to control it, no supervision or order. And
Right.
according to Grace Slick, the vibes were bad. Something was very particular, but not particularly bad, just particular. It was kind of a hazy, abrasive, and unsure day. I expected the loving vibes of Woodstock, but That was not coming out of me. It was a whole different thing.
It was almost the exact opposite.
Absolutely. As I mentioned, Marty Ballin got his head bashed in a few times. I don't know when he went. Apparently, he saw this guy getting beat up, and Ballin decided to go out and take matters in his hands. Tried to break up the fight, and he ended up getting his ass kicked in the process. In
Yeah.
fact, there's footage of Paul Kentner going one-on-one, cutting promos between one of the Hell's Angels about, excuse me, you're just, hey, don't worry about my business. You worry about your business. No, I will worry about what happens to our singer's business is our business. You just beat up our singer there. Oh gosh.
Yeah, it was a
And
bad thing all around.
oh man, a lot of shit went down there. Now, the Hells Angels were hired by the management of the Rolling Stones on the recommendation of the Grateful Dead and the Jefferson Airplane, who both had previously used the Angels for security at performances without incident. For about $500 worth of beer, this story had been denied by some parties who were directly involved. Now, according to the road manager of the Stones, Sam Cutler, the only agreement was that the Angels could make sure nobody tampered with the generators. But that was the extent of it. There was no way they were going to be the police force or anything like that. That's all bollocks. The deal was made at a meeting including Cutler, Grateful Dead manager Rock Scully, and Peter Neal, a member of the Hells Angels San Francisco chapter. According to Cutler, the arrangement was that all the bands were supposed to share on the $500 cost of the beer for the Hells Angels. But the person who paid for it was me, and I never got it back to this day. You know. And
Wow.
one of the members of the Hells Angels, I guess Bill Friedrich, recalled this exchange he had with Cutler, and which he just said, quote unquote, "We don't police things. We're not a security force. We go to concerts to enjoy ourselves and have fun. Well, what about helping people out? You know, giving directions and things? Sure, we can do that." You know, well, they sadly didn't really do that. All right, there. Minnesota Vikings fan wants to add me to the call. I guess they're going to be starting their show pretty soon. Hey, did you want to? I was thinking about this. Since we're getting near the old program here, we could probably continue this on our Tuesday broadcast there of
Oh
the
yeah,
show
because
there.
there's a lot to go.
Oh yeah, we got lots more to talk about, believe it or not, and pretty much about this festival and what goes on afterwards. And I'm not sure if you want to cover the '70s the catalog as well,
Yeah, we'll go over.
if you want.
We'll start at Goat's Head Soup and go from there.
Okay, absolutely there. Now, did you want to hang out with me and the Vikings and Super Bowl crew for a while there? Because
Yeah,
they want to,
I may
because
do that.
they want to add us to the call. Yeah, we can
Okay, let me
do
go
that.
ahead.
Okay, I'm going to message.
Well, we need to stop this one, I guess,
Okay, there. All right.
and we'll
So
invite everybody to show up tomorrow for Ray Harryhausen, and we'll discuss his
yes, we're going to do
monsters.
that. Yeah, the monster creations of Ray Harryhausen and how it kind of like motivated the CGI that we have in movies now and today. All
Right.
right. All right. So, okay, we're gonna end this, and we'll continue our discussion of the Stones and their albums and stories behind album titles and songs this coming Tuesday. This will be episode